How you doing?
Yeah, very well, very well. Please.
Excellent. Thanks for having me here, guys.
Thank you for coming.
So I think a lot of DJs are kind of seen as faceless, so a lot of them don't get to speak. We're on stage all the time, but we don't get to have a chance to speak to people like this, so it's kind of different for me. But I hope that a lot of you guys are familiar with my work and are familiar with what I've done, and I'll try to give you my best kind of references of my life and what I'm doing, what I'm hope to do in my future, and hopefully inspire you guys a little bit. I'll start by talking about my first time I came to England about 20 years ago. I was still living between Florida and Philadelphia. I had a day job, trying to figure out what I was trying to do in my life. I was interested in making music, but I wasn't by any means good at it, or I didn't know how to make music that well. I wasn't a musician, I didn't know how to play music, but I love music. I was a crazy avid music fan. I collected records like vigorously. I collected everything I could. I learned about music, I learned about their credits, learned about different artists. And my first trip to leave America, actually, I went to India on an Air India flight. Very, very cheap flight. Had a friend, his name was Brent, and he lived in India temporarily because he had actually gone AWOL from the army in the Philippines, and he was hiding from getting court-martialed. So he went to India, and I was trading emails with him. And he's like, hey man, you should come to India. Like I've got this whole place figured out. And this is almost 20 years ago, so India was quite different. At the time, I took a flight. I was actually also used my trip to work a little bit with the Red Cross. There had just been an earthquake there in the Rann of Kutch, right at the border of Pakistan and India. So I knew some people that were working there, so my goal was to go there. I had a little bit of funding to work with those people, but I went to India to just kind of experience like the world. My first time. Being in Florida, you don't have a lot of outside opportunities, and I think it's an insular place, growing up in a small town like what I did. So my first trip to India 20 years ago, I arrived in New Delhi and I met my friend Brent, and he was like the typical American, like walked like a cowboy around. Like he was the only guy I knew that wasn't Indian in the area. And he had a motorcycle. He bought an Enfield motorcycle. And I learned later all he was trying to do was sell the motorcycle to me so he had money to get back to America because he just was broke. But he taught me a lot about like life there. And I was there because I collected music and I was interested in what was happening in India. Not new music, but old music. I was obsessed with Bollywood films and soundtracks, and I learned about the different records I could purchase there and actually sell online and like sell and make a little profit. This is 20 years ago, and I was still like, one of my sources of income was selling music, like physical vinyl copies. So I went there with him. I traveled around India. We went to Rishikesh, which is a small town in the north between New Delhi and Ladakh. We took his motorcycle. I was riding on the back of it. We went really late at night because on the highways in India, it's very dangerous. There's pollution everywhere. They have these giant Tata trucks everywhere. And I think 20 years ago, it was sort of like the beginning of this new industrial revolution in India where there was crazy construction everywhere. Everybody was buying cars. It was very dangerous to drive on the highways. We went up to Rishikesh, and I was looking for records. I was buying records in any shop I could find. I knew I could kind of like make a profit by buying records and selling them. This guy was crazy though, Brent. I learned that when I was over here. At one point we were just like riding up the side of the river, the Ganges River, up there, and he was like, hey, let's go swimming in the river. And I was like, all right, it's cool, it's nice and fresh, it's like cold water. I was pretty sure I could just swim in the river and we could kind of like coast down into the city or whatever and just have a little nice swim. But I learned that the Ganges River is one of the craziest rapids in the world, and it was super dangerous. And I got in the water with him, and I remember him saying like, yeah, just lean your feet forward, you're gonna be okay. You're just gonna float away and it'll end up in the town, we'll just swim and it'll be great. And that didn't happen at all. Like right when I got in the water, I was sucked like 20 feet down into the water, complete pitch black darkness. I couldn't see anything. I was for sure knew I was dying. Every time I was think I was just give up my life and I was in the middle of this river in India just dead, I would just somehow pluck up and have a little gasp of air. And I remember like swimming and choking to death in the water. And I remember seeing a little girl like pointing at me from the riverside like, there's a dead guy in the water, just screaming. And I remember I saw Brent. He actually made it to the beach somewhere. Like it was like, come follow me. And I was like, I can't follow you. It's like crazy, the rapids. I saw one giant rock in the middle of this river, and I grabbed onto it with the energy I had. For sure I was gonna die on this river. And I dragged myself onto the middle of this rock in the middle of the river, and I had no energy left. You know when you exhaust every amount of muscles in your body and you just like collapse? And I couldn't even lift my neck up, my body, and I was bleeding everywhere. Like this rock was so sharp, everything about it was like bleeding on it. And I was there like knocked out for like 20 minutes, and Brent was like, don't worry, I'll come save you. And I remember like being on this rock for a while, and it literally 40 minutes later, he shows up with a boat of 2 Indian guys like against the river, and they're like, come on, we'll get you on this boat. But Brent was just sort of like haggling with them for the money for this ride, because he was like, knew he was being taken for like 20 rupees. It was way too much. And I was like, dude, I'm gonna die on this rock. So please help me out. Let me just go on this river. And eventually I got off this rock. I had severe cuts everywhere. I had to go to like a little doctor there in Rishikesh. I decided I got to get rid of Brent. He was crazy. I packed all my records up I had purchased in India. I was like 19 years old, maybe 20. And I decided I'm gonna head to England for the first time. And I arrived here, and with the records I bought in India, I bought like maybe 100 records. I went everywhere. I spent 2 weeks looking, collecting music, found some amazing records. I knew some were rare, I knew some were different. And I actually made $1,000. I sold all these vinyl records, and I paid for my entire trip. It was only $1,000 to go to India for like 6 months living there, like on the seat of my pants, like doing whatever I could to live. I spent time in England, like 3 days going to record shops and selling my vinyl. Because back then you could actually, people were buying and selling records, like vinyl records. And there was a collector's, and I would sell my records here. And I remember that was the first time I was like, wow, I can kind of like make a living out of doing something that's on the periphery of what I was used to, you know, like finding ways to make money and doing it with music. And this is before I even knew how to produce music. I was wanting to be a DJ, but I was always trying to find different ways to just survive, you know, and make music and be part of the music scene. And that was the very first time I had left my country and traveled and experienced something. But I was profoundly changed when I went to India, because I saw how beautiful the country was. And I've been going back there for every year, almost every year for the past like 10 years, doing shows or doing work or shooting videos. And I always found that I was really lucky to leave Florida and be able to have a passport and actually journey outside of the country, which a lot of Americans aren't able to do, or they don't even have the motivation to do that. And I feel really lucky that I did that, because when I did that at 19, I was addicted to traveling. I was addicted to learning about different music. I was addicted to just experiencing all these kind of things that I could do and try to take advantage of every opportunity that I've had. So I think that was 20 years ago, almost, it was like 18 years ago. And it's crazy to come back to London and then drive out here through the rainiest day ever, and then show up here at Oxford, and it's beautiful sunshine. I get to speak to you guys, and I never imagined my career would take me somewhere like this. So I really appreciate for inviting me and for you guys to be here. So if you're not familiar, I'll tell you guys a little bit about who I am and what I do. I'm a DJ, most of you guys might have seen me play somewhere in England, like Reading, Leeds, or if you're not too old, maybe Fabric London back in the day. It's cool to just see people and like connect with you guys here, because when I come to England, it's always to do shows, and I've been coming here for years. So I'm a DJ first and foremost, a producer and a songwriter, but that's sort of accidental how I became a songwriter, because I never thought I would sit around and like write lyrics or put together music or record instruments for people. But through a series of events, I just became that person. I became a songwriter. And I think I've always been on the outside of the music industry. I've never gone and said to myself, I want to make a pop song, or I want to have a #1 hit. Since the beginning, I've just been like making what I want. And I've been really lucky, because as I've made what I want, as I've produced different music, the music scene has changed over the last 10 years, and it's sort of kind of caught up to what I was doing. I never expected like songs like Lean On by Major Lazer or like Where Are You Now or any of these records to become big hits, but they just sort of did on their own. And through that, I've learned what it takes to make a hit and what it takes to work your way through this industry. So yeah, it's been a crazy journey. And I think, for me, leaving Florida at a really young age and being able to experience all the different things I have. And I moved to Philadelphia when I was about 20 years old to Temple University to try to leave Florida, because Florida is so, it's just, there's not a lot of dreams there, you know? Like when you're there, you sort of have the feeling that you're gonna be there forever. you kind of go there to die. That's what I always told people, because that's where people do go there and retire. So I didn't want to spend my life there and just disintegrate into that state. So I found a way to go to Philadelphia, and I went to Philadelphia because, for one, it was really cheap. I lived in a place in Philadelphia. I paid my rent $250 a month, and because of that, I had a job, and I was able to create. I think a lot of young people, if they want to move to a city like London or New York, you're not going to find a place under $3,000, $4,000. You're barely going to find money to eat. So I think a lot of times it's hard for some young people to be creative because there's not a lot of opportunities, and you have to really budget what you do. I was there in Philadelphia for about 5 years, and I'll tell you the truth, I never really felt like I was going to become a creator or a musician or make a living out of music. When I was younger, there really wasn't any other DJs as a career. There wasn't people that said, like, you can make electronic music or you can be a DJ and that's how you can live your life. If you were going to be somebody that does a creative job, I feel like you're up against a big challenge because you have to give up everything else. And it's like a void to enter, to see if you can make it or not. How many of you guys are here that want to be a painter or artist or a musician, or a few of you guys? So I feel like your parents are excited about that. Some of them. I mean, I think some parents are really, believe in the dreams of whatever their children want to do. It's great, but my father was never, he never understood what I did. Even to this day, he still thinks like I deal drugs or something. He doesn't know how I could afford to pay my rent, but I think I just persevered, and I never expected to have the success that I have. Philadelphia was great because I was DJing there, and I bought a little piece of land. I had a studio there, and it became the home of Mad Decent, which Guy has mentioned, and that was my record label. And it's about 15 years old, and it still puts out music or release music, but it was sort of the home for whatever I wanted to do because I didn't have a record label. I just signed a record deal this year, actually, for the first time. I signed with Columbia Records. I'm like almost 40 years old. It's very strange to have a record deal out of nowhere. But every year, I just created music, and I had ideas for projects, and I was like, how about I go do this, or how about I go do that? Or I was fascinated by music, so I explored it and learned. And I would just DJ, make a little money, and I would pay my mortgage in my house in Philadelphia. And I built a studio. We built an amazing place for a creative space for a lot of different artists to come, and that label flourished a little bit to where it is today. And when I was in Philadelphia, I still did whatever jobs I could to make money. I was a writer for a little while at the Fader magazine. I actually wrote a cover story about Atlanta hip hop, and then I got a chance to write an article about Brazil for the editor. And we went to Brazil together, but he decided, you know what, he was a better writer than I was anyway, so he was like, you just do whatever you do. I'm gonna write the story about you going to Brazil. So we went to Brazil together, and I was fascinated by this music called baile funk, and it was he's actually Brazilian, so he probably knows from Rio, like funk carioca, and it was this music that came out of the favelas of Brazil, and it was, if I could explain it in layman's terms, it's a combination of almost heavy metal and like Miami bass. And it's like gangster music, and it was the craziest music I'd ever heard, and I knew the kids were just making it on their own, like what I did. Because I never had anybody teach me how to make music. Like I was saying before, there was no DJs or no producers back then to become. I had nobody to like learn from. Nowadays, any young person could kind of go on YouTube and find a kind of style they like and learn to create it. It's very simple, and I'm kind of envious of the young producers that they're able to do that. But back then, I had to literally go to Brazil and meet the people to create the music and to learn about it, because there also wasn't any online places to explore back then. This is 15 years ago, 10 years ago. And nowadays, you have access to everything. And it really makes a huge difference for people creating music and listening to music, that they can find whatever they want and discover music so easily and profoundly. But when I was younger, I had to physically go to Brazil, learn about the music, create music, and meet people. I didn't speak a word of Portuguese, but I had the magazine with me, and it was always my excuse, like, oh, we're writing for this magazine, so everybody let me enter their music studio or the radio stations, and even like deep in the favelas, I was able to like travel with a photographer, and I'm talking like I'd pass like militias and people with crazy ammunition and weapons and drugs. It was insane. I was like, what the hell am I doing? How is this possible? And then I was going deep in the studios, and even though I didn't speak any Portuguese at the time, I knew exactly what these guys were using to make music. So I was speaking to them about the programs they were using, and I was creating with them, and it opened my eyes to the language of music, how it was transcending the language in general. And in Brazil, I was able to communicate with everybody, all the producers, by the words that we shared, like this bar, the format, or whatever there was in the technical terms of making music. So it was really another experience that helped to shape what I do and who I am as a producer. I mean, fast forward, I've been going to Brazil for 10 years now, doing shows and producing music. But back then it was a very new thing, and it was also very exciting. I think I started to create a buzz about this music, this funk music that was happening in the favelas. And I made a mixtape, and it was called Hollertronics, and it was a mixtape of a party we did in Philadelphia. And we created our own party, and it was very exciting new sounds. We had Miami bass, we had this funk music, we had hip hop, we had 80s, and I mean, it was basically mashup music. And when I talk about it in terms now, it seems like that music, it's easy to create now, but back then we were very progressive in the way we were mixing music as DJs. We were able to tour this music. I was going to New York and Los Angeles and San Francisco, and I did amazing concerts, and I learned about the marketing of my small mixtape. I was making these little mixtapes myself, and going to driving to New York and printing 400 copies of them and selling them online for $7, $8 a piece, and these only cost me 40 cents to make. So I was making enough money to buy a house in Philadelphia by selling these mixtapes, and I bought my first computer really and started to learn how to produce. And this mixtape, one of the mixtapes reached a girl here in England named MIA, and she was fascinated by what I was doing in a kind of pastiche version of all the different music I was creating in mixtapes. And she somehow convinced her record label from London, XL, to book her a flight to fly to Philadelphia to make a whole album with me. And granted, I didn't even have a computer then. I didn't even know how to make music, really. I just knew how to DJ. So she found me. We decided to create a mixtape or album there, but I had no idea how to even record a vocal. I don't know, we were just lost. And our job was to create a whole album. And I remember she went back to England and she had nothing. We had done some really weird ideas, and they were so mad 'cause they spent the whole budget of her trying to go to visit me in Philadelphia and make an album together. We made one song. It was called Bucky Dun Gun. It was kind of a cool record. It was underground, but I think that me and her, we married our styles together at that moment though. And over the next couple of years, I was helping her develop what she was doing. I learned everything as far as making music from her, from how she does it and what her angle was, because she was almost 90% attitude and only 10% of the music. And I understood how that really affects and how you can release music and market it the way that she did it. So I learned the basics of recording and writing there with her in Philadelphia. And then I think 10 years later, from that moment, I moved to Los Angeles and decided to take full responsibility as a music producer and started to learn how to create. And I discovered lots of different other kinds of music. I learned how to make other kinds of music. I did this project called Major Lazer, which became sort of the biggest project I've ever worked on. And the success of that has been insane. The project has had 10 billion streams over YouTube and Spotify, and it was all independent as well. We never signed a label deal. We just did that music ourselves. So I don't know if you guys understand how crazy that is, but we had the first independent #1 on the radio in America, and that's just unheard of. And it couldn't happen again because the labels are so smart now. They know how to capitalize on streaming and then how to use streaming. But yeah, and I guess that's the most condensed version of my history over the past 15, 20 years. And I think a lot of you guys know who I am, so I would like to open up a dialogue with Guy and you guys about what you're interested in and how I could help you sort of succeed in whatever questions and discoveries you want to do.
Yeah, sounds good. All right, thank you. So I'll start with a couple of questions and then we'll open up to the audience. So what do you think is your mission as an artist?
As an artist, my mission, let's see. There's two different sides to being an artist. You have to have the business side and you have to have the creative side. I mean, it's weird. A lot of people can't juggle both together, hand in hand. So for me, I've always been really adamant about understanding the business side of it, so I can understand everything from the touring side to the marketing side to what it takes to make a living doing music. But on the creative side, I've always had a sort of no rules feeling to what I've done. I've been lucky that I've always been able to offset my songwriting as a DJ, because I'd be able to go all over the world, and I've never had any label to answer to about like, oh, we need a record like this, or can you make it like this? And I feel bad for some young artists who are kind of stable into their deal and having to create something that they might not be that proud of. But I've always had the freedom to just take risks and do whatever. And I think it's important to do. And I think it's also important to understand that you can make as much bad music as you want, or as you might have to make. As long as you make one good song, people remember that. They don't remember all the bad stuff I did. I think I've done so many terrible songs that you guys don't know them. You know my good songs, hopefully. But I think any artist is like that. They have a giant catalog, and as long as you kind of put out quality, that's what matters the most. I'm just interested in putting out as much as possible and doing as much as possible, because I find it like amazing to have the opportunity to create. I want to just do as much as possible. So that's sort of my motto.
So you're also one of the most active DJs in the world, touring constantly and performing over hundreds of shows a year. What makes you so passionate about performing in addition to producing music?
The one thing I think I've learned to tour and create and to get my work done all at the same time, it's kind of hard to sleep sometimes. I'm always doing, like I left the stage yesterday, went to bed and caught a plane to come here, and I've got to go to Amsterdam tonight for another show tomorrow. That's actually a really loose day for me, because sometimes I'll do 2-3 shows in a night, fly like right after the last show to Vegas or whatever, and do a show in the daytime, then like fly to another city, and it's crazy to do that. It's crazy the schedule I have, but I found a way to like regulate my life so I can get work done and do shows, and I'm actually really lucky that I love it. I love it still. Like I love to make music. I love to DJ, and I think the randomness of my career and the eclecticness of what I DJ, it makes it easy to do different things. Like I never plan a DJ set. I have so many different projects I can pull from to play. Like it might be like the pop songs, it might be like something underground I just created. I think when people come see me play, they're gonna expect to be surprised. So I've been really lucky that I never get bored. I had a conversation the other day. I was at this beach party in Las Vegas, and this other DJ named Tiesto came by to me, and he's like, how do you always DJ and like, you don't have to smile the whole time like I do? And I'm like, that sucks to like have to smile all day. Like I just like, some DJing and I'm thinking about it, but like a lot of guys like him, it's just like he has to like do this and like smile and like be happy, because it's a show sometimes. And I'm totally cool with that, but I don't feel like I have to do a show. I'm actually there every time I DJ. I'm like, I want to play music like this, or I want to do this, or I want to try this, and it's still fun for me. It's still inspiring to me every time I can play and I can make music.
Great. So you've said that you never want to trap yourself into a specific genre.
Yeah.
Could you talk about the different influences that shape the music that you produce?
I think, like I said before, anybody can learn how to make whatever they want now. They have YouTube tutorials, and the programs are very easy to get. They're free if you want them. When I was younger, I didn't have anybody. I didn't even have a computer. I had to like save my money up to buy my first PC computer, and then bootleg all the programs and find someone that could do that for me, and find a guy that could give me a motherboard and like audio outputs, and I go to a Guitar Center and like steal samplers, and then like pawn off my turntables and to pay rent and buy them back again. And it was always a hard job for me. I didn't actually release any music till I was like 25, 24, which is, nowadays kids are releasing music at 15, 16, 17. I think the value in that is that I was able to constantly like grind and learn, and I think because I started a lot older, I was able to have the history and understand a lot about music and a lot about different kinds of music and take chances on music. So I think my journey is a lot different than a lot of younger people. I mean, when I was coming to England and Europe the first times as a DJ, I was still carrying these big giant bags of records. I see you guys have records right there, like giant boxes of records, and I was not making that much money. I'm sorry, Belinda, but I wasn't early on. I was flying Ryanair, and what's the other airline? EasyJet, right? The thing is, they charge you for your carry-on bag's weight. So I was like carrying 2 boxes of records, and I was paying like $400 to carry these records. I was getting paid like $600 to do the show. And the tickets were like $100. So I was like, for the flight, I was making like $50 sometimes. And I was realizing how hard it was to grind that way. And now I just show up with like a key this big and I have all the music and it's so much easier. But back then it was everything was a challenge. And I think because I did that, I value all the opportunities I have now. So if I can make X amount of dollars by doing 10 shows in a week, I'm gonna try to do it as long as I don't like die.
So your most recent EP, California, features tracks with rappers such as Designer, Lil Yachty, and Dram. As a producer, could you talk about how different the creative process is working with rappers compared to some of the pop stars that you've worked with in the past?
Yeah, I think I've never treated any artist differently. As a songwriter and producer, getting away from the DJ side, as a songwriter and producer, you spend a lot of time in the studio with people, and you have to. I think 80% of making music is the chemistry you have with somebody in the studio, and the energy you give and receive from them. It's not just like a factory where you just like poof, you there, you're writing the thing, they're with a guitar. No, it's like it's a lot of manipulation sometimes and communication, and like as a producer, you want artists to go this direction, you have to go this direction. And so there's a lot of finessing you have to do as a producer to find out what you want and get what you want out of an artist. Then there's also the new world of hip hop where guys just send beats away and the songs are like on the radio the next day. So there's a new world too. But with guys like Yachty and a lot of young rappers, I've been really lucky that I meet these guys on the road and I'm able to speak their language and I make music in the same way as they do, like very much like folk music. We don't have any rules or guidelines to what we do. So, and I have a lot of vibes with those guys where I can learn from them and give them what they want and try to show them different directions. So for me, there's not much of a difference. Some big stars, you might want to work a little harder to make them happy, but if I ever have a studio session and I'm not catching a vibe with somebody and I'm not feeling like I'm creating, or I don't think it's authentic, I'm not afraid to not do anything with that person. I mean, I've released like 500 songs probably on the different projects I've done, but I've probably written 5,000 songs that you'll never hear, for good reason, a lot of them. But some of them are great. Like we're just talking, I had a song with Post Malone that we did a whole video for in Australia, but he wanted it for his album, then it didn't make the album now, but it's too old now sounding for me, so it's like a song nobody will ever hear, and a video no one will ever see. But that happens a lot. I think nowadays I have to be very careful about the releases and what makes sense as far as the territories and the rights of the artist and what labels they are. So it doesn't change, but I think a lot of young artists, like you mentioned, a lot of these young hip hop artists are fascinating to me because they're so fearless. Mm-hmm. When I was younger, hip hop, I was obsessed with hip hop. I learned about music through hip hop production. Like I was really obsessed with New York City and the advent of hip hop and how producers were creating out of nothing with samples and looping things up and creating music very postmodern in that style. And then I always kept hip hop really close to me as a producer, and I've never had a chance to produce like big name hip hop artists like the Eminems or whoever might be on the radio back in the day. But the younger guys, they're like crazy. They just like release whatever they want. And I think if I was a young rapper 10 years ago, I'd be afraid to release records like what Lil Yachty sounds like or what Trippie Redd sounds like because it didn't fit the norm of what was happening. But now these guys, they bypass the guard of what hip hop is, and they bypass the people that would always like to secure a sound of hip hop, and they go right to the audience because they were on SoundCloud and they were on Spotify with themselves. And it's fascinating to see how, if you look at the top charts on Spotify or Apple Music, the top 20 charts is gonna have 19 rap songs by young kids that are between like 15 and 20 years old. And I think that's an amazing shift because the audience wants that. They're reaching people directly. And I feel like hip hop always had the chance to be that music that reaches directly, but there was always a guard by the labels, by the radio, and now you don't need any of that. You just go straight to SoundCloud or you go straight to Spotify and you're reaching audience. So I love that. I love the rebellious and the like anarchist qualities of these young guys who are on the last EP I just produced.
Great. So now's the perfect time to open up to the audience. So if you have a question, please raise your hand and wait for the microphone to reach you. So we'll start with the lady in the back.
Hello, thank you so much for your presentation. I wanted to know what kind of challenges you faced when trying to scale the Mad Decent Block Party across the world.
it's strange because as an artist myself, I always booked myself at the block party, and I would do it for free because it's hard to make money at these block parties. We had a lot of successful ones. We did in America at the height of the block party. We did 24 cities, like Miami, New Orleans, Vancouver, and it was amazing to like create a touring entity like that. Our first show we did was in South Africa. We did Cape Town and Johannesburg, our first international ones. But the timing wasn't right for us because the block parties kind of expanded at the same time that all the other giant festivals expanded, like EDC and Ultra, and we did it ourselves. We did everything ourselves with the block party. We didn't have any funding. These guys had endless funding, so it was easier for them to go kind of bankrupt or at least lose money every year to have a foothold and be the one thing there in that city, whether it's Shanghai or if it's in Mexico City, and we had to actually like make a little money or at least pay the artist. And I was kind of sick of always asking everybody I knew as a favor, like, hey, can you guys play the block party a little bit? And then the rappers we had started to book were just exploding. Like I couldn't even afford anybody. Like Lil Yachty went from like $5,000 to $75,000. I couldn't even afford to pay, these rappers. So it just became a corner of the market that I wasn't interested in as much. We're doing 3 block parties a year now in America, and I think we did one in Pakistan. We're finding, actually it's hard, we're finding the markets that if nobody wants to go to, at least as far as the big budget. So we did Islamabad this year. I think we're going to do, maybe no. We did Islamabad this year. We're going to do, we're doing a Philadelphia one again. I think we're just trying to find different ways to expand in different markets for the block parties. But it's very competitive now. Like everybody has a festival, and there's everything from Rolling Loud. You have like in England, there's no room for any festivals. They have everything from Reading Leeds to V-Fest. Like there's no room for new things. My favorite place to ever play though was we had Major Lazer did the Notting Hill Carnival for about 6 years, and every year was 5 years we did it. Every year was crazier and bigger. We did it under the Westway, and it was one of my favorite shows I've ever done. Like every year we had, from when we didn't have any releases to when we had our biggest songs, and we had amazing guests. So I'm always interested in developing things in different countries. We did Jamaica for 5 years. I remember the very first time I played Jamaica in Kingston, it was so difficult to explain to people who I was or get any work done. I had to kind of be a salesman about, I do this kind of music and maybe you want to work with this. And then I just gave up and just paid people to record records. I was like, here, just give me whatever. And it was always pretty bad music in Jamaica unless they're excited about working with you and they give you their best song. And then eventually, as I went to Jamaica and built up our status there and built up like the artists that we had, people started giving us their best records. And we made a record like Boomaye with Busy Signal or Vibes Cartel on Upon the Floor. And it was amazing to like see the transition, but it took a lot of work. I had to go to Jamaica every year and do shows there when they didn't have any scene for festivals. They had no shows in Kingston, and we just developed that little by little till we had 100 kids, and then we had 300 kids at a university, and then we had 2,000 and 6,000 and 7,000. And it's amazing to see, developing a scene like what we did in Kingston.
Great, thank you. So on to the next question. We'll go to the third row. Sakir.
Hi, thank you. I just wanted to ask you a question about artists getting the credit they're due for their music, and especially New Orleans Bounce.
Yeah.
Because when you did a song with Nicky DeB when he was alive, you gave him like full credit, and the song you did with Big Frida as well. But then when Big Frida was on Formation and now Nice for What with like the Triggerman beat running all the way through it, do you think kind of bigger, more mainstream artists are giving bounce music and other styles the kind of credit it's due?
I think when I was doing music in New Orleans especially, I was one of the places like along with Rio or places in India, like New Orleans had a huge stamp on my career and like influenced me so much, and I was so excited to be part of what happened in New Orleans. But when I think back about Express Yourself and doing a song with like a trans artist as the star of the record, it was so crazy now. I would never be able to make that video again. Like with the dance culture and the culture in New Orleans, it would just be too controversial for me to be part of that now. But it's weird because it's crazy because I wouldn't have allowed that record to be created and that culture around it to be created. So sometimes I feel like it's too bad that a lot of people can't create something that crazy. But I think doing that with Nicky DeB and helping to develop who he was as an artist, it did raise exposure. So people like, I think, Beyonce, or people like, Beyonce actually saw Express Yourself video, and she hired the director of that video, Lil Internet, to direct 2 videos from a Lemonade video. So I know that she was aware of what was happening there. But for artists like that, I mean, Beyonce's a whole different universe. So I don't think she's gonna take her time out to, I've produced lots of records for her over the years, but she does more as well for New Orleans. I mean, if you saw her Coachella performance, she did so much amazing stuff that involved New Orleans culture that was so amazing. But I think also with trans artists, there's not really been a popular gay artist in America, I think ever. There hasn't been, maybe Frank Ocean maybe, but I think there really isn't like a space yet for that. And I think that there needs to be a breakthrough for that, especially because all the dance artists, for the most part, are gay. And I think that it's still a bit of a edgy place to push the music out. So hopefully we cross a point where that's not a problem at all, and that's easy. But I think right now it's still a little too controversial, especially for Drake to, I think, to explore who Big Freedia is probably difficult for him to do. I remember when I did that record, I was trying to get a rapper on it. Who was I trying to get? Maybe Mystical, somebody. I was trying to get some rapper on it, the remix of it, to make a more commercial version of Express Yourself. And he was like, nah, that's just too gay for me to do. And I was like, but it was in the studio with his friend, he's like, well, that's really New Orleans, that's like what it is. But I think a lot of the guys, like, they know that the culture is inherently gay, but they didn't want to take part of it. So I think now it's probably a lot easier for them to do that. I mean, they have a lot of, bisexual artists, like I think Tyler, the Creator, who, or people who are kind of more, it's more of a mystery about their sexuality. I think that's easier for people to take care of and explore. But I think for the most part, Big Freedia is doing all right. She had a reality show on VH1 and it was pretty funny. So you guys can check it out.
Thank you. Next question, we'll go to the third row. Yeah.
Hello. So within the sort of same vein, if you Google best DJs, all 51 that come up are male. And as someone who actively listens to EDM and likes exploring new artists, I can only name about 4 female DJs. So why do you think there's such a huge gender imbalance in the EDM and DJing world, especially in the top ranks? And what are you doing as a prominent male artist to change this?
I mean, any chance I get to sign a female DJ or book them, I try the hardest. I think a lot of them, it's hard to find. There's like really great artists like Alice in Wonderland or Rez, or you had Nervo who might speak here in a couple weeks. I think a lot of young women, maybe they're not, I think, taking chances to become DJs. I think a lot of them don't get opportunities and they might not, do it. I feel like I see in the industry, especially in America, a lot more women engineers like that work in the studios. Like I had a full-time engineer that was a woman for about a year, and I'm working with Mark Ronson, and her studio is run by a woman who's the engineer, and she's amazing. I think behind the scenes there's a lot more women than you might know, but the DJs on the forefront and producers, Toki Monster's another great one. There just isn't that many, and there hasn't been a new one in about 2-3 years that I've noticed. There's been a couple that we always try to support, and that's a really great question. But I don't know how to create more opportunities for the women, or I think that we need more exposure so they can say, hey, I can do that too. Because when you see a strong woman, I think a lot of young girls are like, I want to be like that. I want to be a politician. A lot of them don't see the DJs on stage and they're like, I want to be like that. So if we can make up more opportunities where they can have that exposure, I think it might create more interest for women to try to be DJs. But for the most part, Mad Decent, whenever we get a chance to sign a woman, we bid as high as we can to get that person on either the roster or to release a record. Yeah. Soft is Hard is another woman who's on Mad Decent. She's great. You can check her out.
Thank you. For the next question, we'll go to the second row.
Hi, thanks for coming. I just wanted to ask, perhaps you could tell us a bit about the first gig that you ended up doing and what you sort of did in order to make sure you had future gigs, or what you did to go about.
The very first show I ever did?
The first show, yeah.
Okay. The very first show I ever did was in Daytona Beach, and there's this middle-aged black dude, and he was a DJ at a pool for like families, and he played with cassettes. And I remember I was buying equipment from him at the time, and he was like, oh, I gotta go to this thing this weekend. Will you DJ for me? And I never DJed before in my life. I was like 17 years old. And I literally only had like a stack of records. He played with tapes. I don't even know what he did. It was like greatest hits, kind of like tape cassette DJing. And I remember I had to play the vinyl I had, and I had like the most random selection of like a Jimi Hendrix record and a Beastie Boys record. And I just didn't even know the idea of rhythm or how to create an environment of different music. And so I played the records I had. I played like a KRS-One song. I played like, ABBA, whatever I had. I just played random records. I didn't realize you had to create a rhythm and like an environment. So like the hotel had called, they said like I scared the whole families out of the pool, and like they just turned off everything, and he never returned my phone calls. But I just learned from then, like I said, there wasn't that many examples of like what I could do. Who could I look up to as a DJ when I was younger? There was one guy named DJ Lazer on the radio in Miami, and I loved what he did. He was a Miami-based DJ. But for the most part, there was no like heroes as DJs. Nowadays you have like so many, and I think you guys can learn easy. It's so easy. There's learning curve for creating music is so much easier now. Even just having guitar tabs. I mean, I never even had money to buy a guitar when I was younger, and I definitely wouldn't have anybody show me how to do it. So I just persevered. I was a terrible DJ for a long time. Even when I did like Hollertronics, this party in Philadelphia, I remember we had this group that booked the same venue as me one day called Soul Wax. They were called Too Many DJs. And they had twice as many people as us, and it was a way better. I was like so mad that they came to my city and like had a better show than me. And so that moment I was like, I'm gonna fucking destroy all these DJs and get as good as I could, right? So at that moment I did. I tried my best to get better as a DJ, and it's not really, at some points it's technical to be a good DJ, but I think for the most part, you have to have a foundation in music, and what do you like to do to create, like what is special about you, and how do you look at an audience like you guys, and how do I give you guys something that's gonna make you feel great? You guys being young, cool college kids is different than like a wedding I'm gonna DJ, or like it's every environment is gonna be different, and you have to take that into consideration every time.
Thank you. Next question, we'll go to the hand all the way in the back.
Hi, I just want to ask, like, as the electronic industry is changing quite rapidly in the recent years, like, the technologies, such as the native instruments machine and Ableton Push, those kind of new technology, do you think they will finally replace the traditional turntables like the CDJs in the future?
Yeah, I mean, if you are a record producer and you're familiar with Ableton, you might know that as a record producer, we're using it wrong. Like, it was always created to make it was created to perform live. And then if you press tab, you get the sequencer that you can create music with. So I think that we've always had different ways to make music and perform music. I personally just like to DJ with a USB key and play music randomly, and I'm good, I know how to use my cues. But if you want to see a great live show, like someone like Odessa or even here like Chase and Status, they're gonna do a crazy light show with a very pre-programmed Ableton setup, and almost every rock band or anybody who's performing live is gonna have an Ableton setup when they perform live. So we're already shifting into that world. I think a lot of people consider the EDM world, the DJ world, to kind of be a bubble that's bursting, and I always think it's kind of stayed at the same place for like 4 or 5 years from its peak. But I don't think you can kind of replace it, because what the DJ world and the DJ shows and the world of nightclubs and festivals has created is an amazing experience. The music is fully mixed to perfection. You're hearing it on the best speakers, the best light show, and I think a lot of times you can't compete. A band or a rapper can't compete with that kind of experience, so we're never going to lose that. But I mean, in rap, it's pretty bad to me live now. There's a few artists that are great, like Travis Scott or Kendrick Lamar, that can put a show on, but a lot of rappers don't have an actualized show yet, so that might change things. But right now, I think the DJ world is still creating the best experience when you go out to what you want to have, so I think that's going to stay around for a while.
Thank you. Next question, we'll go to the lady in the fifth row.
Hi. What is one of the, if I had to say, a life lesson that you've learned from one of your past experiences? If you could share something with us, from a lesson that you've learned in the past.
With music or with
in
anything?
life in general.
Experience I've learned from, man. I mean, every day I learn more and more. I think that I've kind of reached as much as I could learn about being a DJ, because it's pretty basic stuff there. But as far as life, I think I learned a lot more about balance, because I have 2 children now. And the more I travel, I'm always like, I can do whatever. I can travel whatever and go to shows and play many shows. But it's hard to find a balance with your family too. And when I do go home and I'm done with the tour, it's almost like you have PTSD. You're like, it's crazy to go from like all this, experience and stimulation at night in the clubs and flying on jets and girls and there's music everywhere, and then you go home and you're like with your kids and you have to like be there for them, like be a really great father and be there with them. And it's always hard to find that balance. So the more I travel, the more I have to find the time to like come down and be great and spend time with my kids. Because if you don't have that instilled, I feel like you're missing a lot out of life. And I feel like my children are very young now, but I want to make sure that I'm there enough. And you know, I try to play with them and make music, but they're only like Imagine Dragons right now. They don't even like my music. So, but I think finding balance, you know, and like not wasting any time, because there's a lot of distractions, especially with what I do. Even my age, I've done so long, it's still like lots of distractions. And if I'm on a show and I'm on a tour and I don't spend the hour I have off writing emails or mixing a record and I go like out, that's time I'm gonna have to spend when I'm home to do that. So every moment you have, you gotta like take your time and manage it really well. And even if you guys are just still figuring out what you wanna do, I think if you're creative or even if you're business minded, the best thing as far as motivation is just do something. Like even if it's a terrible song you're making, just make it. If you're a writer, just write. Even if it's just the worst shit you've ever written, just write it and write it and write it, because you can't ever ask for inspiration to come. You know, you don't just wait around. Like I think when people say they have writer's block, it's just a lie. That's just being lazy. Even if you're just, you know, trying, experimenting something, you just always do something. Like keep yourself busy, keep your mind active.
Thank you. Next question. We'll go to the person just in front.
Hi, thank you very much for the music and for the speech. How do you balance such like a busy touring schedule and producing new music and like finding new music and new inspirations and everything?
It's really hard. Like, I mean, on the way here, I was listening to demos like in the car, like listening to mixes on my headphones. And then when I leave here, I'll be like relieved because I had to kind of watch some of the speeches and know what was going on here. And then now I can go back and like I can write emails back to my management about the questions that they have or whatever. So, I mean, it's hard. It's like so hard, and it's also you want to like kind of like just give up a little bit and just not do anything for sometimes, you know. But like she was asking before, you just got to find the best. And I'm so like blessed to be able to make music as a living. I can't even imagine. Like I was never good at any job. The longest job I had was at Subway, and we got robbed so many times I had to quit. I was like, this fucking sucks. So, and I can't even imagine getting a job again. Like, I mean, like, I'm sure you guys are all gonna have to deal with getting a job, and I don't envy you for that. But even now, I have to treat what I do as a job. You know, even if it's like, it looks luxurious and it's amazing, I have to treat every day like this. I have to be the best I can be at whatever I'm doing. Like, and I'm not always that person. And I'm always, you know, I might be getting a little lost or wasting my time with something. So every day I treat this like a job still, because I'm so lucky to be able to come like places like this and, you know, and visit you guys and, you know, visit wherever I might go. Like if I go to Dubai or if I go to like Mexico, this is like the dream. You know, some people can only travel once a year out of the country, and I'm able to like every day fly and see something new.
Well, so cheers for pointing out the vinyls. Is it cool if I could ask you after? Like,
yeah, I'll definitely sign them. Yeah,
oh,
for
cheers!
Sure.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for supporting it.
Yeah. Thank you. Next question. We'll go to the hand just down the row. Yep.
So, having grown up in Florida and lived there until I moved here to study, I can definitely relate to a lot of what you've said. How can an aspiring songwriter get your ear?
Get my ear?
Yeah.
I mean, now it's I listen to as much music as I possibly can, but now you have to be like just something crazy. Like I lived in LA for so long, and there's such a songwritery world there where the songs are just like the same. They're just like dressed up differently, and I'm just so bored that there's a guy recently from New Orleans that came to my studio, and I was like, wow, this guy's singing weird stuff. Like again, like it's like, but I've always been the kind of guy that's been on the outside, you know, like trying to do something different. And it's never been easy for me to like write a simple song or, you know, pop music. And I think you just, personally, you have to be like really exciting. I don't have an ear for pop that much. I have more of an ear for like craziness, you know, and then I can help you figure out how to make that work. But even I've been all over the world. Like I went to Africa last year, and I remember having like a couple days in Lagos with different producers. And at the end of the day, like the polyrhythms might be differently. There might be different swing settings, but we're all like writing the same kind of pop music with the same pre-choruses and like wanting the same. We hear like the same, you know, notes in our heads when you hear the music. So it's strange to go all over the world and see that. But yeah, I think just be different, because we have so much of the same happening right now in the music scene. That I think that if you push yourself to just be as crazy as possible, it's going to be your only hope to succeed, I feel like.
Great. We have time for one or two more questions. So for the next one, we'll go to the gentleman just there.
Thanks. As a popular producer, you've got a really loyal fan base. Do you have any kind of funny or weird fan encounters that have stuck with you over the years?
Do we have any? There's a lot of weird fans. I mean, for Major Lazer, I remember we always had like really crazy fans in some places like Belgium or China, or fans make some crazy stuff for us, like artwork. And this one girl gave us a whole case of M&Ms that had my face on it. She was from North Carolina. I mean, I think in the world, like I'm just like a DJ and producer, but I think in this world, like these days, fans are so insane. Like I was saying to him, Guy, earlier, there was like a picture of me. Took a picture of him back up there in the bookcase, and I had my hands like this. And there's actually an Instagram page called Diplo holding his hands like this. And so I was like, that'll probably make that page, you know? So there's always like strange, funny fan things. And I think that's just, it's cool. And it's, a lot of young producers and a lot of young DJs don't realize how much power there is in kind of developing their brand. And it's kind of sucks because it goes against the nature of what it is to be a musician and a creative person, but that's just the game that there is. You have to play it both sides, and I think you have to create a brand, and you have to create something that says like, this is me and this is my identity. Even if you're someone like a producer, you have to always work on that, because I mean, at this point, it's like 95% of the scene. You have like bloggers and vloggers and people that are like famous on Instagram that are creating music that's pretty bad, but it's getting listened to because they already have a fan base because of who they are and what they do. There's nothing wrong with that. Some of them might become great musicians as well, but you have to understand the power in that. And if you either play it or you just find a way to manipulate it.
Thank you. So we have time for one final question. So we'll go to the hand just there. In the back, yeah.
I can answer your questions if you want to afterwards, like personally, whatever.
Hi. So 20 years ago, did you ever expect that you'd reach this level? And I mean, did you believe in it? And can you please describe the first time that you felt, look, I've made it? I
think when I first quit my job, the very first time, I was like, you know what, I don't care if I don't make any music, I'm gonna find a way to hustle. Like, because I always dreamed of just being able to control my own destiny in creating something. I never thought I was even good at this. You know, I always feel like even when it comes down to the musicianship, I learned in the past couple of years how to play music and how to, you know, learn chord progressions and stay in key and different things. But I never expected to have a career out of it and for it to always develop and to always grow. I was happy when the first year I paid my taxes back. I was like, whoa! I actually made enough to pay taxes, because the first couple of years the government never asked me for any money back. I think, and the crazy thing is, I think Kanye had a quote that was really good once, where he said, like, even as you get bigger, you have a responsibility to yourself to kind of always become greater as a creator, you know. And like, when you have a little bit of power, and he's actually kind of crazy now, but if you have a little bit of power, it's important to take advantage of, like, I have this format, I have this stage, or I have this amount of money I can invest in my creativity. And I think I always invest back into my music, whether it's building another studio or signing new artists or helping to develop something else or spending time developing a concert series in Islamabad or whatever it is. It's important to stay on it. And if you don't move at 100 miles an hour right now in the music scene, you're going to be behind everybody else, because it does turn over so quickly right now. So yeah, it's very fast.
Actually, we'll take one more question, that's all right. So we'll go to the hand all the way in the back.
A lot of people have music in their life as an escape.
Uh-huh.
And when you're continuously surrounded by music, I guess, what is your escape?
We'll start as an escape. Well, I think you have a good point that now that I'm constantly listening to my own music or demos or whatever it is, it becomes noise at some point. You know, it's hard, like you said, how do I find a good songwriter? And that's probably the hardest thing to do when you're as acclimated to music as I am. It does become like a fuzz, like a humming, a noise all the time. But I still like find classics. I still find records that I find like solace in, you know? Some songs that are before my time, or even songs that I've made, or there's a couple songs that I just, working with somebody recently, I've been listening to over and over again. And that feels good again. It feels good again to like get goosebumps on your own music, because that's something a lot of people lose. But if not, I think being active too. Like I hate being inside when it's a sunny day, you know? So I always want to be out there, and I want to be out in the sun, and you know, that's kind of like probably the one thing I do. Is I hate taking flights all day long, but that's something it's like the worst part of my job is like every day I wake up and I fly somewhere else. Then I jump off the airplane, I just run into wherever I can do, you know? But I find some solace in that and some escape in that. But music is still great. I think we're really lucky right now that like there's so many young people creating music, and there's so many people, like I said before, that are fearless and doing something crazy right now, and there's no filter for a lot of the music, and that's something special. We always had that filter for all the years where you had to go through so many different levels to reach people, and now you can go right to them with whatever you create.
All right, thank you. Unfortunately, that's all we have time for, but please join me in thanking Diplo for coming today.